Let's talk about how to pass the first round interview for Morgan Stanley. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Ready English. In today's video we're going to talk about how to pass the first round interview for Morgan Stanley, and stick around until the end when I'm going to go through the 10 most common reasons why people fail interviews at Morgan Stanley, directly from senior recruiters at Morgan Stanley who have interviewed thousands of candidates. Let's start off with 5 fast facts about Morgan Stanley working across core values, deals and corporate social responsibility, and their technology, some little known facts that you might not know. First of all, Morgan Stanley has 5 core values: do the right thing, put clients first, lead with exceptional ideas, commit to diversity and inclusion, and give back. In terms of technology, Morgan Stanley has over 15,000 technologists which work there. And last year they made 43,000 software or feature enhancements. And you'll be amazed to know that the reason why Morgan Stanley's technology is so important is because they support over 10 billion transactions every year. In terms of deals, 2 of Morgan Stanley's most recent or notable deals that they've advised on was the Kansas City South Bank $31 billion sale to Canadian Pacific, as well as advising Bain Capital and H&F on their $37 billion acquisition of Athena Health. And of course, let's not forget their corporate social responsibility. Since 2006, Morgan Stanley's employees have donated 2.6 million hours of volunteering time. The Morgan Stanley Alliance for Children's Mental Health has reached over 25 million people since it first came about in 2020. And through the Strategy Challenge Pro Bono program, Morgan Stanley staff have donated 145,000 hours of service since 2009. There's just a couple of facts that you can use to make your answer for why Morgan Stanley really impactful and unique. Now let's talk about Morgan Stanley's first round interview process, and we'll split this for non-graduates and graduates based upon our research from publicly available sources from the last 3 months. If you're a non-graduate, you're much more likely to have what I would call a 15-minute HR or pre-screener interview, which is basically going to involve the same questions, but it's going to be done over the phone. If you're a graduate, this process has most likely been automated, in which case you would do a higher view video interview. Now interestingly, Morgan Stanley's higher view interview does allow you to re-record your answer. You can do that twice, and also you can assume for 5 questions and you'll have 2 minutes to answer and 1 minute to respond. Now let's go through some of the most common questions that we came across from Morgan Stanley in our research, and then lastly I'm going to end up with a couple of weird and wonderful questions which I really liked, which we can dig into, and finally we're going to end off this video talking about the 10 most common reasons why people fail according to Morgan Stanley's senior recruiters. So here are the 5 most common Morgan Stanley interview questions that we came across. And of course, coming in at number 1 is why Morgan Stanley? Now this is a question that you must prepare for, and I always talk about 5 fast facts in my video, and make sure those facts are unique and impactful. In fact, you'll see that one of the most common reasons why people fail interviews at Morgan Stanley, according to senior recruiters, is just poor research. This should take you no longer than 15 minutes, and Morgan Stanley, as a bank and as a publicly traded business, has an enormous wealth of information available. Just pick out 5 facts which resonate with you, which have the specificity of the facts that I outlined in, on my 5 fast facts, and you'll really come up with a well-researched answer, and this should take you no longer than 15 minutes. Question number 2, why do you want to do this job? You should always make sure that you go through the job description prior to doing the interview, because it's really going to give you all the information that you need to know about doing the job, and also what you're going to get asked in the interview. When job descriptions talk about these are the things that we want, these are the skills that we need, and the experiences that you should have or are desirable, essentially that person is already telling you what you need to talk about in the interview. It's just a case of taking that information and putting it into your answers. So when answering why this job, you want to split this down into 2 parts. First of all, really clearly demonstrate a good understanding of the job and what you're going to be doing. So on a day-to-day basis, I would need to do A, B, C, D, E. Now, if the job description that you've gotten from Morgan Stanley isn't particularly helpful, then just take the job title, plug it into Google, and go and find a really good job description from one of the many libraries of job descriptions that there are out there, or perhaps the same job description from a different bank or from a different financial services company. The second part of this answer should really be you thinking about what are the 2 or 3 skills that the recruiter is really going to want me to have that's going to make me excellent at this job. Is it going to be to do with me being able to analyze a company, to use Excel, to use Bloomberg Terminal? What are the top 3 skills that would really make the recruiter go, yeah, this person's a great fit for the job? Then you should say that you have those skills and demonstrate the proof, which in your case is going to be what experience have you had, maybe what have you studied, or what professional qualifications have you gotten. Question number 3, tell me a bit about yourself. This is really common on HR screeners and telephone interviews. And a lot of times when people are asked this question, they tend to be really laid back and not really give the full amount of information. They're a bit too casual with their response. Now, if you haven't already done so, if you've never done an interview before, this is a great place for you to start in your interview preparation. In fact, at the end of this video, we'll recommend that you check out Tell Me About Yourself, which is really the most important question you can prepare for straight out the gate, because this is really demonstrating your ability to sell yourself. If you're a professional, then summarize your working experience in your first sentence. If you're a graduate, then summarize your academic experience in 1 sentence. And you would move through and say, what are you doing right now? What have you done before? What would you like to do? Work experience, extracurricular skills and hobbies, and finally any other additional skills and interests that you feel would be relevant. Sometimes a misconception that people have about this question is they'll say, well, haven't you read my CV? Don't you already know who I am? Probably not, to be frankly honest with you, particularly if somebody's interviewing on a phone. And I'd be interested to hear from any recruiters or any interviewers who are watching this video. But I know for myself, whenever I have hired staff or assisted somebody else in hiring staff, you're trying to blitz through as many interviews as possible in a day or in a certain period of time. So actually, maybe I haven't had the chance to have a look at your CV, or maybe I just want to hear from you rather than just reading about your life in a document. Question number 4, give me a time when you've worked under pressure. Working in investment banking, in any office within investment banking, is a high stress, high pressure environment. I really want to know and want you to be able to clearly demonstrate that you're able to get stuff done, and you're able to get stuff done under pressure. So talking about tight deadlines, being flexible, being adaptable, being able to cope with changing situations. Maybe you're working at Starbucks and a member of staff was sick. Maybe you had a project to do and somebody wasn't pulling their weight. Maybe you made a mistake and you had to make an adjustment and work through the night to get a project done. But really clearly demonstrating that you can work under pressure is such a crucial skill. One of the most important things that you can demonstrate as a type A performer, or in terms of being able to be high class, particularly if you're going to work in an investment bank, is that you're adaptable and flexible. You're able to change very quickly, adapt, take in new information, make a decision and get the work done. Question number 5, what's your biggest weakness and how did you grow from it? Now, if you don't know how to answer this question, check out the card up above, which gives you the link to our most recent video about how to think about answering this question. What's your biggest weakness is really just what's the biggest lesson that you've learned. We all have weaknesses, we've all made mistakes, and we all have things that we need to improve. And talking about your biggest weakness is really you just saying, well, there was a time when I was quite disorganized. I had a project that was due in and I actually missed the deadline. Luckily, when I spoke to my professor, she was really kind to me and she said that she'd give me another week. But I vowed to myself that I would never repeat that mistake again. So now what I've done, knowing that my weakness sometimes is that I'm disorganized, is I make sure everything gets diarized. I plan my day the night before. I make sure I have a fixed schedule. I write everything down and I have a clear to-do list. And also I make sure that I put my phone in airplane mode so that I can't be distracted when I'm at work. Your adaptability is really important. Another key skill to really demonstrate and that you can show within this question is that you're coachable. you're teachable, you have the ability to learn. Really good grade A performers basically are teachable, they're moldable, because they don't start out that way. They learn from other people, they take on board feedback, they learn from their mistakes, and then they go, right, this is what I need to do so that I don't repeat this again. So those are the 5 most common questions from Morgan Stanley, and I would say you're almost guaranteed to get at least 3, if not 4 of those 5 questions. Here's some unusual questions that came up that we loved. They may not be relevant to your business unit, but I always think it's nice to know that these questions are out there and how to think about answering these questions. Question number 1, what are the different uses for a coat hanger? I love this brain teaser question because just trying to think about a fixed object, these are also quite common questions within technology companies. Why did they ask them? Because it's really to do with creative problem solving. So what could you use a coat hanger for? Well, first of all, you could use it to hang a coat, you could use it to pick a lock, you could use it to prop open a door, you could use it to pick something up, you could use it as a dog toy, you could use it as a security measure. There are lots of different ways to think about. Now, whenever you get asked this question, like what's the different uses for a particular item, I like to just think about my day and whether I could use these things. So I think, well, I wake up in the morning, I could use a coat hanger to put the kettle on, I could use a coat hanger as a belt, I could use a coat hanger to play with my dog in the morning, I could use my coat hanger to pick up an item off of the floor, I could use a coat hanger to break into my car. I couldn't, because I wouldn't be able to do that, and my car is a little bit newer and doesn't really work with that trick. All these different types of things, just think about your day or maybe somebody else's day, and you'll come up with loads of different and innovative ways. Of course, it's not the most effective thing to do. A coat hanger isn't a great belt, but it's just a good way to think about answering this question. Question number 2, how many golf balls can you fit into this room? This is more of a sort of, maybe a question that you would expect in sales and trading. You might expect this from a consulting firm as well. And it's just thinking about a golf ball, so think about a room. I've also seen this question asked before in terms of like a market size and case study question, which is how many X are there in Y? How many piano tuners are there in Chicago? How many light bulbs are there in London? So the really important thing about answering a question like this is just to demonstrate your thinking out loud. Whenever I prep candidates to go for consulting case studies, interviews, or management consulting firms, I just say, look, the most important thing to recognize is, number 1, there are no wrong answers if you just explain your logic out loud and try to be conservative in your estimation. So say, for example, this room here, so I think, well, how big is a golf ball? So a golf ball is maybe that big, so that looks to be about kind of 4 centimeters squared if I'm just using or 8 centimeter cubed. So I think, well, how big is this room? So I'd kind of go like this. Well, I'd say maybe this is 8 meter cubed, and then I would infer from that and do my maths out loud. So really importantly, where I see people go wrong is that they'll just kind of sit there in silence for about 30, 60, 90 seconds and boom, they'll just give an answer. There's no indication at all. There's no questions being asked to the interviewer. You know, for example, if it said into this room or into a room, then you might ask about the size of the room. You might say, you know, is there a particular type of golf ball? This is just about intelligent problem solving. What you tend to find is good thinkers ask good questions. So instead of just answering it straight away, they'd ask you some questions, they'd try and get a feel for the problem, see if they could glean out some more information, and just act like you're a bit stupid, or you're explaining to a child. So it'd be like, well, a golf ball is this big. Well, how many golf balls could I fit along this wall? Could I fit along this wall? How many golf balls could I stack up? And then I'd use that to create a figure that I could then calculate and give to the interviewer. Question number 3, do you keep up with markets in the industry? If so, how so? This is a question that actually came up recently for a client of mine who's interviewing for different investment banks, and he basically said to me, well, I'm not really sure how to answer this question. So CNBC, Bloomberg, Reuters, reading annual reports, reading Google News, getting, recent news reports. Maybe you keep on top of some sort of industry news. Do you read the Financial Times? Do you read The Economist? And so on and so forth. So listing those things out and also being reasonable. It's probably not believable that you read the Financial Times every day. Maybe you do, but one thing to bear in mind, and I'm going to talk about this in the 10 most common reasons people fail Morgan Stanley interviews, is because people try and be a bit too smart for their own good. And I've caught candidates out many times, and I do not come from a finance background. I'm really just a straight interview coach. It doesn't matter to me what the company, what the role is. I can just adapt to those circumstances and those criteria. And very often I might go, well, I read the Financial Times every day, and I go, oh, that's great, fantastic. What's the story that you read yesterday? And they're like, oh, don't be a smart ass. Question number 4. What do you know about our products? This is a classic question that I've seen catch out so many people for investment banking interviews, particularly if you're working in a business unit which has fixed financial products. Make sure you read up about the products. You don't need to know very much about them. You can do some kind of like cross-referential reading and go and read from other news sources or other websites about those products. But knowing basically what it is that you're going to be talking about, what you're going to be dealing with clients, is really incredibly helpful when it comes to the interview, and demonstrates a deeper layer of information. And being able to answer about the products that the bank does, depending upon your business unit, really demonstrates a great attention to detail. Okay, so here are the 10 biggest interview mistakes according to Morgan Stanley senior recruiters. I'll pop the link to this down into the description below. You can read it yourself. It's pretty short, so I just thought I'd add some detail in. Mistake number 1, not doing the research. This is the biggest mistake that senior recruiters identified. For me, it's the biggest mistake that people just make all the time. Too casual, too laid back, not enough research. Believe me, if you're listening to the same answer hundreds of times a year, I know who's done the research and who hasn't done the research. It's not a big deal. It will take you maybe, an hour, 2 hours to do, but it's going to make a significant difference. Don't let yourself down by not doing the research. Reason number 2, not wanting the job. People will apply for one job in an investment bank so that they can get their foot in the door to go and do another job. Don't allude to that into the interview. That may well be your plan, and ultimately that may well happen at an investment bank. And I've seen that happen with clients who I've previously worked with. They've come back to me for additional support and advice as they're moving between business units. But don't say that in the interview. Let your work clearly demonstrate that by itself. Mistake number 3, padding your resume. Now, by all means, some of us will extend the truth, but don't put stuff in your CV that isn't true, particularly if it's highly technical or it's really easy for me to sift it out. For example, a particular qualification, a programming language if you're going for a technologist role. Like, you may stretch the truth, but don't lie. Mistake number 4, I thought this was really interesting, not sending a thank you email. I don't tend to suggest this. I think this is quite an American thing to do. I know that we don't do this in the UK, but what I would say is it's good to connect with people if you have their personal details. This is much rarer in the UK and much more common in the US, where networking is more prevalent. But for sure, there's really nothing wrong with saying, "Hi Steve, thanks so much for your time today. I really enjoyed it and I look forward to hearing from you." Particularly, it's very easy to be forgotten. Half the process is just being remembered because people have such busy lives. So just sending that email at the end of the day, once I've finished doing all my interviews, might just be like, oh, that was really nice. Mistake number 5, not asking any questions. I love good questions, particularly as an interviewer. It's super interesting. Taking the time to say, what's something that I could learn that would really help me for this job? What's been a really great experience that you've had? What's the best advice that you've learned while working here? What's advice that you'd give to yourself if you were starting this job again and you were my age? asking questions which delve into that person's personal experience and really taking the opportunity to learn. When you think about an interview, particularly if you get to interview someone who's much more senior than you may never get an opportunity to really speak to them like this again or for some period of time. So this is a great opportunity to really dig into some questions and learn something from somebody who's much further down the road to where you want to be. Mistake number 6, pigeonholing yourself. This is trying to demonstrate really particular knowledge about a particular industry, which may not be suitable if it's for a general role. Really, you want to demonstrate an interest in the role rather than in a particular industry, particularly if there's no call for that, and if there's a general role, then you may get overlooked. Mistake number 7, being too casual. I see this way too often, particularly from graduates. The kind of general demeanor of yeah, whatever, and yeah, I know that, and you know, arrogance is not cool. Overconfidence is fine, but confidence should be based upon experience. Particularly for a graduate role, I think that you want to be polite, kind, respectful, ask questions, explain yourself, address formally, act formally, and speak formally. Mistake number 8, fumbling the obvious questions. The obvious questions are, why do you want to work in this company? Why do you want to do this role? And tell me a bit about yourself. These are really the 3 cornerstone questions that you will get time and time again. It doesn't matter what the company and what the role. If you fumble these already, the interviewer is kind of thinking, damn, this person really hasn't done their homework. Because don't forget, a bad interview is a really negative experience for the interviewer, because they're thinking, God, I wish I could be interviewing somebody who actually cared about this job and what they're going to do. So try not to fumble the obvious questions. Mistake number 9, pretending to know something that you don't. Honesty is always the best policy, particularly if you have no knowledge or a basic knowledge. Job descriptions, remember, are like a wish list for jobs. So if you don't know something, just say you don't know, you'd be willing to learn, or you only have a basic knowledge. And finally, mistake number 10, not being yourself. A lot of people will try and put on an act. One of the most common pieces of feedback that I give to people when I do one-to-one sessions with them is they'll give me an answer and say, would you actually talk like that to your friend? And I don't mean in terms of informal language, but just in terms of like using big words, trying to appear smart or trying to appear different to how you are. And they say no. I say, look, the purpose of communication is to be understood. Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please, if you have, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, drop me a comment down below. If you want more help, then make sure to check out the resources down in the description below, and I'll see you in our next video. Bye.